I'm used to being able to do things well, like I can like research a problem. I can create things. Like I'm really competent in that way. And I just tried to force will so long with my child to try to control and like guarantee specific outcomes or paths for us.
I'm Miranda Rake.
And I'm Sarah Wheeler, and this is The Mother of It All, where we take on motherhood through the lens of culture and culture through the lens of motherhood. Good morning, Miss Rake.
Good morning.
It's nice to see you here.
Nice to see you too.
I heard that you're so busy, so bored, according to your Substack.
Oh, right. Yeah. I, was feeling really overwhelmed and was supposed to be doing work, and Nellie was home with an ear infection. And
cool.
Yeah, on the last good working day before spring break. And then after spring break, we have a 4-day weekend.
Also cool.
Yeah. And
that's what's up.
Genius, right? So our next full week of school is the week of April 14th.
It's next school year.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not that I'm counting, but it is 3 weeks away. And so I was sort of freaking out, and I put on Frozen 2 for her and was like, okay, I'm going to get some work done. And then I sat down at my computer and I was like, I can't focus. And then you feel that panic.
I wonder how. Yes,
right,
I know
that panic where you're like, I must work. I have 90 minutes. This is all I have. And then
I basically feel that panic as an ADHD just all the time.
Oh, good.
So yeah.
Oh, good. Well, this is very relevant to our conversation because I woke up in a panic the other night, and then I took like a Am I Autistic quiz, and it told me that I probably was and I should get evaluated.
Oh, that's an interesting version of the like middle of the night. Whatever woo-woos.
It actually sort of soothed me. I was like, this explains everything. And then,
you went back to sleep. Yeah, we can talk about that. I mean, we have a pretty good lineup for that conversation today.
We'll talk about that. But yeah, Janet Manley had sent me an email about being so busy, so bored. And about 6 months ago, I had a drink with a friend, and, I was like, how are you? And she said, I'm so busy and I'm so bored. And it's coming at me from all directions, and it's resonating a lot as a mom in her early 40s with 2 little kids and work. And a podcast that, we love to do, but doesn't pay us a lot of money,
shout out to paid subscribers.
Yeah, please become a paid subscriber.
Motherofitall.substack.com.
Yeah, this doesn't bore me, but yeah. So, but that piece seemed to resonate with people, which was cool. And I think we're all in that boat. And so that kind of felt nice.
Is the boredom the parenting or like the work that you have to do for money?
You know what it is like...
or just like the monotony of exhaustion. I
was thinking about this, so like Nellie was playing in her room and she was occupying herself happily. And there's like this part of my brain that goes, I could get something done. Oh, I could sit down with a really interesting book right now. But I've been trained to know that like the second I sit down with a really interesting book, she's going to scream at me and need something. And then I'll just be mad. So I don't even try to sit down with the interesting book because it will be so painful to be yanked away from it.
Right.
Does that make sense? So instead I just like wander around and like empty
you don't have
the dishwasher
anymore. As we talked about on our last paid subscribers only, Just Us episode, you quit Instagram.
Yes.
So what do you do? How do you make your time shitty?
Yes.
In small moments. You pace literally around the house. Is that the analog version of scrolling Instagram? Like just picking shit up and being like, I haven't played with this. I haven't looked at that.
You know what I do is I take things from certain rooms to other rooms where they're supposed to be, right? Like, here's this stuffy, and I'll carry it upstairs, and then I get upstairs and I don't remember why I'm there, and then I go back down to the kitchen because there's something to do in there, and then go back, and then Nellie yells.
That's like 20% of my brain power at all times. I do it in other people's houses. I'm like,
good.
I'm like, toiletries shouldn't be out here. Actually, nobody's house is as much of a shit show as mine, so I don't have the opportunity. But is an antidote, I did this with anecdote the other day, which is not what I'm trying to say. Everything in that family, I guess, is difficult.
Antidote
is an antidote to your boredom being a witch. Because you went to your witch club last night, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
that's
not
coven.
What they call it.
It's a coven. Yeah.
Am I allowed to say witch if I'm not part of the coven?
Yeah.
Like, is that like a identity group only term?
It's very
welcoming.
welcoming.
Can I call them witches?
Please call them witches. Yeah.
So you went to the coven last night.
Yes, a gathering.
What was up?
Yeah, well, it's Ostera, which is
that the spring equinox?
Yeah.
Yes, nailed it. My son's guitar teacher told me that yesterday. Yeah. So yeah,
yay. I
have cool friends as well.
I'm new to this too, I should say. This is my first, I'm only at the beginning of my first like Wheel of the Year cycle. So I'm brand new.
You're using a lot of new terminology and I'm loving it. Okay.
Yeah. So what was cool was it's a group of women and we talked about what this coven like means to us. And I literally went from a writing class with Rachel Yoder where the theme was Mother Monster. I had 1 hour between that and the coven gathering. And I mean, I am like a new person today. I'm like, I'm like,
could just do that every night.
Communities of women and, you know, all of our darkness and our richness and reclaiming our connectivity. And we all kind of said why we were there. And the person who is really one of the founding organizers, her reason was community magic.
Ooh,
and I was
like that term.
Oh yes, like exactly.
Yeah. Well, I went to my feminist book club last night,
I want to hear
which
about
I think
this.
is essentially a coven. We could have some great crossover parties and conversations.
We're planning that, so we should do that. Yeah.
In the it's feminists of the world. And so we're like specifically interested in looking at feminism outside the US and like kind of outside of privileged white women.
Could speak to that, I think.
I know. Yes. Yeah. How is Amsterdam feminism going? And I think I'm the only mother. And it's there's people of all ages. There's some lovely young things. There's a lot of like people with different like, you know, sexual identities. And it's just like, it's just really fun. And it's like, everybody's obviously smart because they want to be in a feminist book club. But like, for some reason we established really early along that we weren't going to like be worried about intellectualism. Maybe it's not having men there. I don't know, that like we weren't going to try to showboat each other intellectually and it was okay to like ask dumb questions. And I feel like I'm being my most like curious self in there.
Yes. That's how the coven feels.
Yeah. And we read this short story for our class last night, The Woman Who Thought She Was a Planet, by this Indian American like sci-fi writer, Vandana Singh. And I was thinking about just like the mother monster thing. And we were comparing it to Night Bitch, where she kind of is so doubtful for so long that she's like becoming a monster. Yeah. And in this other story, this woman just wakes up and she's like, I'm a motherfucking planet. That's what's up.
Sweet.
And it was a kind of certainty that I appreciated. So I'm also feeling good after I'm thinking about, I think it's really a story about menopause. Everyone should read it.
We'll link it.
Oh yeah, we'll put it in our bookshop. So we just opened a bookshop. If you go to bookshop is bookshop an org? I think it's .org.
Let me
check. .com.
We'll link it.
You can search Mother of It All, and we have like a little storefront there.
It is a .org.
Isn't it? I had that feeling, that strange feeling when something
our bookshop is bookshop.org/shop/Mother of It All.
Or you can just search
it.
Because that's
you'll
exhausting.
Find it. I know.
And so I'll put this book of short stories in there. Yeah. But I was like, oh, okay, I have that to look forward to. When I go through menopause, I will wake up one day and be like, I'm a planet.
I do feel like joining these groups of women right now feels almost like menopause prep. Like I'm like, I am going to need these women around me. And I need smart and magical and curious, interesting women.
Well, I think it's the next frontier. I mean, I want to bring on our guest, and I know they can speak to this, but like I see, other than all sorts of unexpected possibilities, like the next kind of cyclical frontier of motherhood is your kids leaving the house and menopause, which, you know, for a lot of people that have babies kind of the age we did coincide.
You know, we're going to talk about this, but I want to one thing that came up last night in the at the coven was like the idea that like if our only purpose was to like reproduce, like we do that and then we would die or whatever, but so there's like,
why do they keep us here
like for wisdom, right? Like why do we outlive men? Like why do we, like there's this wisdom time maybe, and like that serves like a purpose for like humanity, like women,
we need old ladies.
And I just hadn't thought of it in that quite that way, that like they're serving this very essential role that like nature has decided, like
men can, and sometimes creepily do, continue to reproduce well into their 80s. Unfortunately. But so they're not contributing anything else. That's probably why. But all
right.
If you're enjoying this episode of The Mother of It All, consider becoming a paid subscriber by going to motherofitall.substack.com, and you'll get monthly bonus episodes and more. If you can't spare $5 a month, it's free and makes a huge difference for us when you share, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit our bookshop storefront by going to bookshop.org and searching for Mother of It All. You'll find all of the books we mention here, as well as our favorite motherhood books and general recommended reading. Now, back to our episode. Well, I can't wait to hear about the next coven meeting. But now I'm really excited to bring on our guest. Debbie Reber is the host of the Tilt Parenting podcast, which so many parents I know tell me is very meaningful to them. It centers on the experience of raising differently wired kids, neurodivergent kids. You use a lot of interchanging terms for that, which I actually really appreciate, Debbie. And it just released its 434th episode. Woo! Debbie is also the author of the book Differently Wired, A Parent's Guide to Raising an Atypical Child with Confidence and Hope. Debbie, we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And I want to jump into the conversation you guys were
just having. I'm taking
notes.
I saw you taking notes.
Oh my gosh, Debbie, please jump in.
I'm sure it'll all resurface because
Well, do you have any thing to add?
Well, I have 3 things that I would like to add to your conversation. Number 1, the boredom piece. I'm so bored with myself, but I'm bored with the stories that I keep talking to my therapist about and the same stuff. So that idea of being bored, it's really with my own mind. So that's the boredom piece.
I'm still doing this after decades. Right. I'm still nobody loves me.
If I have to listen to the same story complaint again.
I feel you.
So that has been very present in my life. Secondly, my book recommendation, I just this morning finished a book called I Who Have Never Known Men.
Oh my God. Wait, one of the youngins at my feminist book club last night recommended that to me.
So
she was like, this is the next book you should read.
Yeah,
and I requested it already at the library hours ago, Debbie.
I mean, synchronicity, but it was so good. And it's like a kind of dystopian science fiction by this Belgian author and very thought provoking, but really speaks to everything you were just talking about, like women in the world. Anyway, so that's number 2. And number 3
I'm destined to read it.
Is I am on the other side of menopause. Officially, I have my estrogen patch. Whoa. I'm wearing it right now. It has changed my life. And I'm just going to say, push for what you need. If I knew what I knew now, I could have saved myself 5 years of hell. So that's my little PSA. It's my TED talk about menopause.
I would be in that audience. Are you specifically talking about hormone replacement therapy, Debbie? Is that what you needed that you wish you'd? Yeah.
So many things I was suffering from that I didn't realize were all connected to perimenopause. So
wow, that's I feel like I hear that message a lot, and I don't. I really am grateful because I feel like women who are further ahead of me will say do it and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's tricky because we women, we are doubted, but also probably partly because of that, we doubt ourselves. And we also we go through so much physical stuff all the time that I have the experience that whenever I'm sick, I just got shingles for the first time. It was super fun. Yeah, on my face. And you know, my husband will be like, you are sick. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like getting treated and stuff, but like, it's just another day in my body. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a tricky spot to be in when perimenopause comes around, mm-hmm. is like, you're not really set up to be like, wait a minute. Yeah. Maybe I need help.
White knuckle it. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Can I put like a calendar alert in my phone for like, I don't know, 3 to 5 years from now to like call you?
Sure.
And get that message again? Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Well, I'll just keep saying it to each other. We'll just try to
if we just keep reminding one another, we'll keep that flame alive. Mm-hmm. Well, Debbie, so my day job, which I don't know why I don't actually talk about too much here, is as an educational psychologist. I coach parents and I teach about neurodiversity. It's one of my favorite topics to hyper focus on. And Miranda is kind of waist deep in learning about her child. I've heard her describe him as a 10-second kid in a 1-second world. I really love that. So we've had many conversations as a result of this about neurodivergent children, like not just how to raise them, which you focus on so well, Debbie, but also the like implications of such an increase in awareness and knowledge of all of this in the parenting culture, and how parents have changed over the decade or so that you've been involved in this work, Debbie, and what we still haven't figured out. So you spent so much time immersed in this world. You've talked about everything from the prison to school pipeline and ADHD to raising healthy gamers, which is on my saved episodes list right now, that we thought you'd be the perfect thought partner for this. So we're really happy you're here. I mean, you've already taught us things. Before we dive into all of those questions, who's caring for your kid right now, Debbie?
Well, my kid is in their first year in university in another country, which I still say those words and I can't believe that is where we are, that we've somehow ended up here against all odds in some ways. So really they're caring for themselves with a lot of Zoom scaffolding from mom and dad. A lot of co-working Pomodoro work dates. My sister, the best auntie, is caring from the US via texting and Discord. So it's a very virtual support system.
Shout out to Auntie.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. What does your child know about FocusMate? Do you ever use that, Debbie? It's like basically instant body doubling from a stranger.
Yeah.
I use it a lot where like, you're just like, okay, I want to work for 20, 50, 90 minutes. And they set you up with a stranger. And there's like a very clear protocol about how you're supposed to be, which is like warm but structured and you don't really get into it. I've matched with a lot of people who seem to be men and no one has ever done anything weird or like pulled their dick out, which amazes me. And I get a lot done. So if they're ever ready to like, if your child's ever ready to like slowly, reduce the parent load on that could be a good bridge.
That's good to know. I will make a note of that.
So Debbie, how did you go from being a parent of this child who you have beautifully released into another country to being someone who talked and wrote about parenting?
Yeah, I always say this was not like part of my career plan of what I wanted to be doing when I grew up, but I have always been someone who has been like a deep dive researcher and a consolidator of information. Like I wrote a book. My very first book was on running for women because I run.
I saw that.
Yeah. Like, yeah. I don't know. I was like, well, I'm going to write a book on running for women. But I was that person that everybody would go to. How do I do this? My knee hurts. And so I just love deep diving into things and then sharing information in a way that's really accessible. And so that's one of my gifts. Mm-hmm. That's one of my strengths. And so I had been working in like the teen girl advocacy space. I've written a number of books for teen girls and I was speaking at conferences and doing this kind of self-worth development work for girls because I was still
good work
discovering my own worth as a 30-year-old woman. Mm-hmm. And then I start raising this child who is not a teen girl and who is really starting to struggle in so many ways. And I kind of like always knew, first of all, that if I'm struggling this much, your kind of average parent who doesn't have like the research skills and the network that I have must be really like struggling right now.
Yeah.
And I just kind of always knew someday when I get my act together and we're not in constant fight or flight chaos mode in my family, I want to create something to help other parents kind of weed through the resources and feel more hopeful about what's going on. So I just kind of had that idea in the back of my mind because at the time, so my kid's 20, things have changed so much. But when I have this like 4-year-old, 5-year-old who's like getting kicked out of schools and is explosive and we don't know what's going on and we're getting conflicting information from neuropsychs and all this stuff, like it was a different time. The word neurodivergence wasn't really out there. Everything was really pathologized and this is a problem and needed fixing. It was very behavioralist and it just didn't feel right. And I was like, this is not cool. Because I know that I had a teacher tell me that in one of the schools that we got disinvited from, that they had never in their 30 years seen a child as intense as mine. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Like, are you serious here? But I knew that was not true. And I also just felt like that's so unfair to my family, to my kid. And so I just wanted to change things so nobody had to go through what we were going through ever again.
Yeah. And that's so relatable. I think a lot of us in the parent space come from a place of like isolation or hurt, like, and then you realize that if you feel that way and you're reading and you're trying to learn and reaching out, like how isolated other people are. And then I'm sure you've encountered this, like the more you do this work, the more you hear from people who are like, even when you share a message that you're like, wow, this is so generic. I've shared this like a million times. And you hear from a new person that's like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, you know, I guess I'm not the only one who was anxious after having a baby or something like that, where you're like, yeah, like everybody, like, and not that everybody has an explosive child, but like, I think that's happening so much. I mean, it's, in my own experience, I'm finding a lot of comfort in community.
Yeah. And if you don't know what you're doing, like I'd never raised a child before, you know, I really thought I was going to crush it. I was really well prepared. We were like 35, very intentionally had this child. We had resources, like we were, you know, as set up as you can be. And I was just completely floundering. We both were, my husband and I were. And yeah, it feels like not only isolating, but like a big fat failure. Like we are just terrible at this. And then you get the judgment from other people and like, well, if you just did this or read this book, I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like this is a whole other level that we are dealing with. They're like, well, all kids are strong-willed. And I'm like, no. You don't know what you're talking about. So it's this kind of almost gaslighting of our experience that was just constant. And I just don't think that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's something I didn't understand until I became a parent. That like when I mean, I worked with parents long before I had my own kids, and I would be like, "What's the problem? Just like put them to bed earlier or whatever," you know, like. Or I had this set of solutions, none of which I'd actually seen play out, and I mean, like just when my child was an infant, it was like I just completely opened this other door to understanding about how complex this all is.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about the culture. Debbie, you referred to how much things have changed, you know, since you started this work. And that's my experience too. Like I started teaching a class to general education teachers about neurodiversity over a decade ago. And it was called special education. And also it was like a Saturday class, you know, in all of their credential experience. And now, you know, 10 years later, I call it neurodiversity in the classroom. And it's, you know, it's a whole, you know, it's half a semester long. And and you can absolutely see the way that people talk about this stuff. And I wonder what you've seen in terms of, you know, is it a privilege afforded to some parents and not others, even to know your child, to kind of access this shift in culture, to know that your child's not neurotypical, and to be able to advocate for them?
It's such an interesting question. And I actually want a little more clarification on it. Like, when you say, is it a privilege? Are you saying, is it something that's not accessible to everyone? Or are you saying that in this day and age, are we privileged that we're able to, that people new to this kind of journey have better access to information?
Well, I guess that's a great, I guess when you ask it that way, I'm like, well, I know it's not accessible to everyone, right? And I know it's also a privilege historically, right? People didn't, our parents, I see all the time when I diagnose a kid that their parent says, well, I kind of had, I have this undiagnosed or not, and here's the bad experience I had. And I do think, a lot of those folks a generation ago were doing their best, but they didn't have, like you said, access to this information. I guess I'm thinking about, you've done some episodes about the intersection of race and neurodivergence, about whether these conversations are really something that only matters to a privileged group, in a sense, and in terms of what priorities you're able to focus on. Right? Can
I tack on to that too? Because I think this was a question that Sarah and I sort of had together. And I think coming from a parent perspective who is in the midst of navigating this, I feel like I'm experiencing my own privilege a lot in terms of time to read, time to seek out an in-network neuropsychiatric evaluation. That took a year.
Just that term is exhausting.
I had to learn that term, and I learned it from other privileged white women with a fair amount of flexibility in their day. People who, I just see the learning curve, and at our local public school, which is pretty diverse, racially, economically, all of these things. I see a divide between parents who are being very, very proactive about what their children need, and who are able to be proactive for a number of reasons, like, and then parents who, when the crisis happens, the school will go to them. And it will be a very different dynamic, as opposed to a parent like me who's pushing early and is actually getting pushed back because it's too early for the school to see it, but I'm telling them what's happening. And I'm noticing that divide, like that cultural divide. And I'm just curious. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. No, I think you brought up so many points. And I think if just from like a resource point of view, there's obviously like time is a resource. And, I think of like people who homeschooled, which I did for a while. And that was a huge privilege that the way our family was designed and the structure and the economic resources we had, that was an option for us. I know it's not an option for so many people. So time, and then the money, like to get a private neuropsych is a fortune. And, rarely can you get insurance to cover it. And so then, and you might be able to push to get it more quickly versus if you're going through the school. The schools are reluctant to do neuropsychs unless they see a big problem. So then that puts the onus on the parents to do more advocacy. And then, as you said, especially, we know that kids of color who are neurodivergent are, especially Black and brown boys, are much more perceived as like behavioral problems. As that's the default would be like, this is a poorly behaved child, as opposed to, oh, this is a neurodivergent child. And when you think about like twice exceptionality, which for listeners who don't know, that's that kind of spicy profile of being gifted, but also having one or more neuro differences that can kind of mask the giftedness. So ADHD and gifted, autistic and gifted. Again, we know that kids of color that's not the default, like, oh, they must be gifted and something else is going on. And then there's the whole class issue of who has time to be in the classroom, who has time to be that squeaky wheel. So yes, I think it is across the board, it is very challenging. And I think, well, we don't have to talk politics, but I think we're entering a really tricky time right now in terms of access to services and pushing for the supports and accommodations our kids need, especially in public school systems, which is a whole other divide.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see that. I think I'm seeing that at our school, and I feel really sad about it and also unsure what to do when I'm in there advocating for my child, who I kind of fundamentally know will be okay because I will get him what he needs at home too. Like we'll do math tutoring if we need to. We'll do, we've talked about that. And so whether or not we get an IEP or 504, ultimately, we're going to just make it work, and if I need to be in there, I'll be in there. And, and all of that is privilege, it feels like. And then I see other stories in the school and feel like I should just quiet down and step back or something.
Or use your privilege to move everybody along, right? Like, I think that, when people listen to us, and I feel like every conversation we have with a teacher, with a school counselor, with the head of school, and I've had many of them in my day, like I feel like they all are slowly pushing the needle forward. So if we are taken more seriously, or we do have a bigger voice in the PTA or whatever, I know a lot of parents don't want to be that parent in the PTA, but that helps everybody kind of move along. So if you do have that privileged voice, I would say lean into it.
That's such a great point, Debbie. I was going to ask you, I hear parents all the time. I live in Oakland. There's a lot of parents with privilege who are kind of like trying to be aware of their privilege. And when I work with parents of neurodivergent kids, sometimes there's a self-consciousness about advocacy, right? Like, am I pushing? Yeah, Miranda's raising her hand, especially when we go to, like, my kids go to a Title I public school. Obviously there are kids there who are dealing with challenges that go further down, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's like fundamental, who need food. And so there's kind of some embarrassment around, nitpicking the IEP or saying, well, like, I really think, we need a consult from, an OT or whatever. And so I always say, like, you got to just advocate for your kid, but you're bringing in this piece that is really beautiful about expanding that advocacy to advocating for all kids. Are there like specific ways that you've seen parents do that feel a little bit less like, I have to get this one thing for my kid and I'm going to advocate for my kid and along the way try to, make life better for all the neurodivergent kids in my community?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about like accommodations, for example, in a classroom, if you're pushing for example, like an area where your child can go to regulate after, having a difficult time, or just needs to kind of, push for that to be available to all students, right? If you're asking, and so just see, like, what can we do? Because we know, actually, like, the science shows and educational researchers would say that a lot of policies and accommodations for neurodivergent students end up being better for all students. Yes. So if we can talk about that.
That's what I tell my teachers.
Yeah, in the classroom, or or if, like, for an example, if there's an assignment, right? Think about like universal design for learning modalities.
One of my other favorite topics.
See? Here we go. But, if you think about, if you're pushing for your child to be able to demonstrate their knowledge of a subject in an alternative way, suggest that, I wonder what this would look, what if you change the whole assignment for everybody? I bet you get some really interesting results. So I think, and
it would be less stigmatizing for that one child.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But if you think about disability justice, right? And I'm thinking of Demystifying Disability from Emily Ladau. And I also just had a great interview with the author, Jessica Slice, of a new book called Unfit Parent. Such a good book.
We love Jessica. Oh, we've had her on the podcast.
Yeah.
And
she's wonderful.
Is full of wisdom.
And, but so if you think about, she would talk about how can we support all disabled people is just make sure the spaces we're in are really inclusive. Make sure, like look around and make sure that the way we're moving through the world is accessible to other people. And I think we can do the same thing when we're advocating for our kids. I also want to just acknowledge, like, if you're in it and your child is suffering and you are being hypervigilant because things are not going well, sometimes you just have to hone in on like getting through the crisis and focus and do what you need to do for your kid. I don't want to like make anyone feel guilty for advocating for what their child needs, because also their mental health, their love of learning, their, future, a lot is at stake. So no fault or shame for really like putting your child's needs first, but we can also kind of widen the net when we're doing that work, when we have the bandwidth to do so.
Well, Debbie, that makes me want to ask, after almost 500 episodes of this podcast and all of these conversations, what are the things that families you think struggle with in isolation around raising differently wired kids, like this tension around advocacy that you wish they knew that many others are struggling with?
Oh, gosh, so many things. But I would say one of the biggest things is that education has to look a certain way, or that the end goal, no matter how we get there, is the same for everybody. I think that is really hard for parents to really kind of come to some kind of peace with, that actually this might look completely different down the road. And that's actually amazing, because I think especially when we have younger kids, even if we're fully like leaning into who they are and we're meeting them where they're at and we're doing our own work and we're just kind of really coming to acceptance of this unusual journey that we're on, we often still are attached to this kind of future. Like, we'll get there. It's just going to look different, but we're still going to get there.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to reevaluate what is there actually look like, and what does it feel like, and what's actually in alignment with who our family is, and what would feel good for our child to actually like work towards. So I think that's one of the biggest disconnects.
Did you have an experice of that, with your own parenting?
No, not at all. I mean, yes. And I've got this really like neurospicy young adult now. As I said, it is 20, and it is really hard when we did a very alternative path, right? We moved abroad, we homeschooled, we moved back to the States. We did a really unusual school kind of situation. We've enriched. We've done all kinds of things, right? And you see so much potential in your child. And so it's hard not to feel this responsibility, like, well, what does that realized potential look like down the road? And how can I make sure that we reach that? And so, the last couple years of my child's high school and then a gap year was me just really walking the walk of being like, you know what? This is not my life. Like, I have no idea what is ultimately going to make this human happy. And it's not my job to figure it out. All I can do is love, support, scaffold, like make sure that my kid knows that I have their back, and create safety and security as much as I can. But beyond that, I got to step back. And that has been a couple of years of my own personal journey through therapy and all the work that I've been doing. Yeah.
All the stories, though it doesn't sound boring at all. Well, that sounds like pretty critical. Are there other, like, I'm thinking about your top 3 things that you wish parents knew about raising a child with neurodivergence? I would assume that would top the list, that you are going to have to do some work to wrestle with what your definition of kind of a good life is for your child. What else stands out for you?
Well, I actually want to add one more thing to that as well.
Please.
Because one of the bigger things that I have been thinking about in the past couple years is this idea of independence. Like, that also is a big word. Like, I want my child to be independent, and, life skills and independence and all that stuff. And it was Megan Ashburn and Jules Edwards who wrote the book, I Will Die on This Hill. And they talk about actually the goal. None of us are independent. We all have support systems and humans that we rely on. The goal is self-determination. We want our kids to lead a self-determined life. And that was like, oh yeah, like that was a big shift for me. Just kind of completely changing. What are we actually doing here? So that's a biggie. And then
what is self-determination?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually had Dr. Gina Riley on my show a couple of months ago, who specifically talking about self-determination theory. But it is really having kind of a sense of agency over one's life, right? It's feeling intrinsically motivated to design the life that works for you, as opposed to feeling as a parent, right, that we want to shape and mold, and we have agendas and we're trying to steer our kids in a certain direction. So, yeah.
And you were talking about Jessica Slice, she's one of the people that helped me understand that, that putting independence up on this pedestal and being afraid of dependence is really our own internalized ableism.
Yes.
That, and it can be our grief sometimes when she talks about becoming a parent, that so many of us, the second that we have a child, become disabled. And part of our grief and our shock is that we are dependent on other people. And it's not something we've had to reckon with if we've otherwise led pretty privileged, able-bodied lives. And so
this comes up
I
a
love
lot
the way that that's connects.
On our show. I mean, we always end up at community, and I feel like increasingly we end up at the challenge, the sort of weirdly surprising challenge of learning to ask for help.
But we don't talk about it a lot about our kids. I mean, I think, Debbie, you're really helping me see that. Yeah. Because independence is such a goal. And, I have a lot of shame about how much I do for my kids. And I go over to other people's houses and I'm just like, oh my God, their kid does X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And the truth is my kids do all that stuff. They just don't always do it in their dynamic with me. But I give myself a lot of shit, and my kids a lot of shit, about how dependent they are. And I wonder if it would free me up to get clear about what I want to do about that, if anything, if I could let go of the shame around it.
That's it came up for me at OT, just to give a little specific, like this last week, we were trying a new OT place, and it was kind of like his observation day, I guess. So he was like doing stuff, and I felt a little bit under observation as well. And I was like, I had Nellie with me too, and I wasn't clear what she was allowed to do in this fabulous, exciting OT room. And so she jumped in the ball pit, and I was kind of like, is this okay? And then when it was time to move to a different room, I helped my son put his socks on. And the OT came over and she said, do you always do his socks for him? And I'm kind of like, well, I guess I just he could, but it's faster. And if I do it though, but and you're like, oh my God, I do. I've done, everything is my fault. This is all my fault. It's because I put his socks on.
Yep.
He's not really, everything is crazy. Never mind. Everyone I'll excuse myself. I see this is all my fault. It was. And I know that she didn't mean anything bad. She was just asking a question. But that guilt, that shame, that self-blame, man. And we saw it a lot in the COVID. We did this big COVID survey. A lot of the responses included references to my child has ADHD, my child has is in speech therapy, my child this and that. And I wonder if it's because of being home with me in COVID, or is it, really, and there seemed to be some guilt around that, doing something wrong. Did COVID do that? And the way that we parented through COVID, did that hold them back? And now this is this, just always looking for something I did wrong is why we're here.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've been writing a lot about this And it's still also like, sorry, I overshare about my relationship with my therapist, but this comes up a lot in my, so do we.
I wrote a Mother's Day piece about my therapist, which, you know, was
excellent.
So I got it.
Okay, so I'm in good company here. Yeah, I mean, I still, again, you know, I mentioned we've lived a very kind of unconventional life in terms of the choices we've made as a family. And like a lot of people wouldn't, you know, pick up and move country and start homeschooling with a 9-year-old neurodivergent kid without any like social network to speak of. But, you know, so I think about choices that we've made and then moving back to New York City, like let's start in a new city for high school. That's a great idea with no friends, like all the things. And so I certainly question a lot when I see my kids struggling. I am really quick to try to find how am I responsible for this? And so I don't believe that's helpful. I think it's it makes sense that we do that because of course we would do anything to prevent our kids from struggling and suffering. And so it's natural that we do that, and it's futile. Like it doesn't matter. Like this is where we are. And I did the best I could. I prioritize connection. I work on myself. I have no clue what I'm doing most of the time. Cause again, I tell this to my kid, I've never raised a neurodivergent young adult. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm making this up as I go along. And so now that's just become part of our dynamic and actually has brought us closer together. But I think that kind of that guilt, which can turn into shame and self-blame, it doesn't help anything at all. So the more we can kind of just be like, yeah, I hear you. I understand you feel that way, but it's okay. Like we're just going to move forward from here.
Yeah. Well, and that focus on, you know, I'm trying to help my child figure out who they are and like they can advocate for themselves. I don't need to get lost in whether they are always doing every little thing for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds very helpful.
Yes.
I work with I really love Ross Greene's work. He wrote The Explosive Child and Raising Human Beings and has an approach to working with children called Collaborative and Proactive Solutions, the unfortunate acronym CPS, which has nothing to do with Child Protective Services. But so one of the tools that I use with parents that's based on that is talking about looking what Ross Greene calls a plan C, of looking at all your expectations for your child, thinking about, first of all, are they actually clear and are all the adults on the same page about those expectations? Have they been communicated? Are they appropriate? But then also, if we have a lot of expectations that aren't being met, and we need to work on some of those collaboratively, what are we going to let go of in the meantime? Mm-hmm. And it's really uncomfortable for parents, even when they actually are doing a lot for their kids, but they're doing it in kind of an emergency mode, like, fine, I'll put your shoes on, to really proactively say, I'm going to drop this expectation for now, mm-hmm. which often does mean doing it for your kid. Not always. Sometimes it means, letting them go to school in their pajamas because you've dropped the expectation of wearing clothes, right? But sometimes they've got to have a lunch, so you're the one making it. And it's very uncomfortable to do, even for me still, but it's hugely eye-opening.
First of all, I love Dr. Ross Greene's work for sure.
Yeah, I bet you do.
We use that so often in our house. And I mean, listen, like if I were to tell you all the ways that I'm supporting my 20-year-old in another country right now, like it would be mind-blowing, right? Because it's a lot, right? I don't care. This is what my kid mm-hmm. needs right now. I'm scaffolding. I pay attention. I look for windows of opportunity. And I see sometimes these incredible growth spurts that I know it's because my kid is ready to and intrinsically motivated to work on that skill. But I think that's one of the biggest struggles for parents that I work with is, where is that line of like learned helplessness and like doing too much, putting on the socks, doing things. I know my kid can do that. So why am I doing it? But some days their nervous system is overloaded and they need help with it. And so I think it is, and that's hard to do in a world where other people are have a lot to say about the way that we're parenting our kids. And so the more we can kind of tune out that noise and just like hone in on, I talk about fluency, right? Being really fluent in our kid and seeing what is their window of tolerance today. Like and looking for the little openings, right? I'm really good at like identifying, ooh, I can see there's motivation here, and then not jumping in and trying to do all the things, but like, what's like one thing that I can kind of push on, that just right balance to stretch. But it is a dance. It's like scaffolding goes up, it comes back down, it goes back up, it comes back down. And it's just very dynamic.
Well, what do you make then of the conversation around overparenting? It sounds like you're complicating a little bit. Is there anything left there that you think is valuable for us as a culture to learn about the ways that we're paying too much attention to our kids? While at the same time, obviously, you're saying, get in there and know your kid and advocate for them. And sometimes, have them be dependent on you, and it's not the end of the world. They might need it.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I think of overparenting, I think of parents who aren't willing to be uncomfortable because of their own anxiety, right? So
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, right. So I think part of this, what we're doing here is it's like a dance, but we want to presume competency but also not trigger their fight or flight, especially again with a neurodivergent kid. It's a little different. So helicopter parenting or overparenting is us trying to control the situation, and not kind of recognizing that our kids are evolving. And I think the individuation process, I think all of this stuff is more complicated for us because we have had to play a much bigger role in setting up play dates and like their prefrontal cortex. Like we're walking around doing their executive functioning for them. And sometimes we just have to be like, oh gosh, I bet that he can probably do his laundry by himself. And here I'm doing it all by myself. So let me like experiment and see, how I can get some buy-in there or how I could get some help. But we have to do that work on ourselves. So I think, but when I think of like helicopter parenting or overparenting, I think of parents who are trying to like manufacture this like perfect ideal outcome, and ensure that they get into the right school and they never experience pain and suffering, and we protect them from everything. And that's not what we're doing here. But we also, when you have a child who can get, overloaded and dysregulated, or, and I was talking with a parent about this morning. I just said, especially with a child who's like doing so much growth right now, going, being away at college and just being so outside a comfort zone, like, a setback, a big setback could be huge in a bad way. Right. So you have to kind of understand, like, we want our kids to fail safe, right? We want them to like take risks. We want them to screw up. We want them to experience that so they can start to learn to be more resilient. But we also don't want to like trigger a mental health breakdown because we've been like, well, you should be able to do this by now.
And we want to examine what part of this is me and what part of this is my kid.
Yes.
Right. It's that back to your therapist, your wonderful therapist.
I was going to say, it always comes back to
such a helpful distinction, Debbie.
Yes. I feel like it's like the self-care element of this feels like almost immeasurable. Like I was thinking about what you were saying about being fluent in your child, and something that I get from going to yoga, which is like a really important care practice for me. It helps me be regulated with my kids. Is to like, my favorite teacher talks a lot about trusting your intuition and trusting that your intuition is real. Like it's a real thing. And she talks a lot about that. How like the things that your body, your nervous system, like your subconscious mind know, and that's really real. Right. And like, it's not a pretend idea. And so I think as a parent,
I ran for PTA president the same day that I got shingles. My body knows. Your body knows.
Yes.
When something's a bad idea.
Screaming at you. But yeah, I think That is so hard when we're parenting a differently wired kid, especially in front of other parents. Ooh. A lot of times I know what to do. I know what he needs, the putting the socks on or the, to get us to the next thing. And, but the ways that we do it, the ways that I know work for him, sometimes I feel self-conscious about those in front of other parents.
Oh, I'm having like a physical response to that, Miranda, just kind of like going back to times where my child had like a big explosion in public, right? Yeah. And where actually like in the postmortem, the thing that made it hardest for me was that I didn't trust that I knew what he needed and do it. Mm-hmm. That I was kind of resisting it, both kind of being annoyed, which that's fine, like, but more importantly, feeling the gaze of other people.
Yes.
And judging my own responses. And that's kind of like at the end of the day, what sat with me in an awful way.
It's
not the fact that my kid was, screaming and pulling my hair in the middle of a art museum.
And you're like smiling kind of, or you're like, like, okay, I guess we're going to go. We'll see you later. Right. Like, sorry. Like, I feel like it makes you not want to do things. Like, I don't want to commit to things with other families because I don't know what kind of day we're going to be having.
Right. But it's not actually your kid you're afraid of. You're afraid of that feeling of not being in line with your own intuition and your own integrity.
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Debbie, what is some of the most unusual but valuable advice that has been given on your show? I'm thinking about a specific episode Miranda was talking about with a
speaking
mom
of intuition,
who hiked the Appalachian Trail with her anxious daughter and had this experience of an anxiety-free time essentially. Mm-hmm. I'm not there are no hacks, right? I think that's a beautiful thing that you frame, that like there's no one size fits all model, but it's so lovely to hear unusual ways that people figure this shit out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that of approaching, especially a child with pretty high like demand avoidance tendencies, is low demand parenting. I don't know if you know Amanda Diekman.
Yes.
Yeah. So
and I have the declarative language handbook, which I find really helpful.
Linda Murphy's book. Yes, I use declarative language all the time. That has been a game changer for me. I still do it. Like when I'm texting with my kid, I'm like very careful about how I word things. So it's like a statement / invitation rather than a question. Like those little tweaks are pretty great. And I think the low demand parenting, that to me, I think it's such an interesting idea and it really does work for so many people, but it's also really radical. If you go lean all into low demand, it is a really radical idea. But when parents...
Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, low demand parenting, and again, it's Amanda wrote this specifically, with autistic kids who have a PDA profile. And for listeners who don't know, PDA stands for, well, the technical definition is pathological demand avoidance. The nicer way of saying that is persistent desire for autonomy. But it's those kids who have a really strong knee-jerk reaction to any kind of perceived demand, like a request, a suggestion, any of that could feel like a demand and then trigger a nervous system reaction, right? And so low demand parenting is basically like, okay, I'm just gonna, to the extreme, I'm gonna strip away all demands. You don't want to go to school, we're just not gonna go to school. Like, you want to like eat cereal for the next 3 days. Okay. It's not, I mean, the way I'm describing it sounds really like extreme, but it's more questioning everything, right? Questioning, why are we doing the things that we're doing, and what's the cost to my child's nervous system, especially a child who's moving to burnout, right? Because of the constant stress on their nervous system. So low demand parenting requires really just like stripping it all back, and it often requires like homeschooling, like creating your own little ecosystem where you aren't being judged and seen by, by the other people, or shamed by other people, because it does seem, and it is kind of a very extreme approach.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. What, like, I mean, and an easy way to say it is picking your battles, but it sets you up for the idea that you're battling already. But just the idea of like, wait, why are there no shoes on the trampoline? Is that really a thing? And the reason I think it matters is that even for non-PDA kids are having demands put on them all frickin' day.
Yeah.
And even if they generally do well with that, and they have a nice time. I mean, I have a kid who's kind of like that. Like, he does well in school and he likes it and he likes after school. But he hits a threshold of just being told what to do. And then he kind of, I think, burns out on that with us.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, I often maybe this research exists and you've seen it, Debbie, but if I had infinite time and was not so busy and so bored, I would love to just do some like time studies in schools, and then at home, just noting how many times a demand is put on a kid, even a light one, throw your wrapper away, whatever. I bet it would be shocking.
Yeah. I don't know many studies, but I'm super curious now.
Oh, I do have a little exercise I do with teachers sometimes where I make them, with usually a neurodivergent kid or a kid who's having, difficulty meeting expectations. I make them just take a Post-it note and keep it in their pocket all day and make a mark every time they redirect the kid. And it takes a lot of, I think, guts as a teacher to do that. But I've had many people who do it and are like, oh, wow, that's a lot. Even if I'm saying it in my nice voice, that's just like feedback. A lot of redirection, which is another way of saying demand sometimes.
Right. I was just thinking of Alfie Kohn's work too. And that was really my first, when I read his book, Unconditional Parenting, I think Ash was maybe like 7, but it was mind blowing to me. And I was like, why do I care about this? Why is this the hill I'm going to die on, that my child doesn't circle around the dining room table 20 times before sitting down? Like, who cares? It just made me really think about that exact thing. Or I remember at one of the 3 schools that we had issues with in early elementary, there was this whole issue over the silver puffy coat, which my kid was like, I don't like that coat and I'm not going to wear that coat. I don't care how cold it is. I don't need the coat. But that was the hill that my kid was going to die on. But that was not okay with the school, right? A lot of the demands and it's arbitrary often. And so I just think when we start to question, what are we after here? Am I after compliance? Because that's not respectful. That's not how we raise kids who understand and know themselves well and feel good about themselves. That's how we raise kids who feel like they're screwing up all the time, because complying is not part of the way they're naturally wired.
This is reminding me of, it's a kind of a nice intersection with a conversation we had earlier this year with Eloise Rickman, who wrote a book called It's Not Fair, about children's rights and what she calls adultism, kind of just really encouraging parents to explore power dynamics in their home. And I think this applies to every kid, but I think sometimes, speaking from my own experience, it's hard to get my kid to do things. And so I think naturally over time, and in some ways in the pandemic, maybe just day after day alone in the house with him, I had to I just, for my own sanity, was like, do I care about this? I don't think so. And then just letting go of a lot of stuff. And then if there is something I care about, it's well, you really need to wear shoes at the park, because I don't know what's on the ground, and not I can,
good stuff. It's
real. It's a real need. I really need you to do this, or we could skip the park. And it's not BS. It's it makes it a lot easier for me to hold that line, because it's real. I'm no, this is a real one. This is not you have to brush your teeth or you'll die. It's well, no, you don't have to brush your teeth. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
I do have one kid that has to, or he will get all the cavities, but the other one really could not, so it's, again, it's these nuances about what's your actual concern here?
Yeah. And it's hard. I think we talked about this also with Catherine Jesser Morton about the doubling down. I think sometimes parents get in this mindset of like, well, I drew this line and I got to hold it. And I think, and again, it goes back to like doing your own work on your own self. Like, why am I doing that? Am I drawing a line that I really care about? Or am I just drawing a line because I'm the adult and I think I have to? Mm-hmm. And then once I draw it, I have to hold it.
Right. Or it's showing weakness.
Right.
What does that mean? Yeah.
Right.
I'm a big fan of like just walking things back and saying, you know what? I actually totally blew that conversation. And we went the total wrong direction here, or I was did what we call accidental parenting. And actually that was completely wrong policy. So we're going to start over.
Yeah. I love that. And whenever I can do that, when I can get off my kind of whatever and go in and talk to my kid and say like, you know, I don't feel good about that. I'm sorry. Like that sucked. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about it? And it feels so good. It's like that moment of walking into that conversation, I'm filled with horrible feelings. And then the moment that I've said, I'm sorry, I feel so much better.
Yeah. Like, and I'm sure your child does too. I mean, that's how connection is created, right? Through you're being vulnerable because you're being human and you're saying, I did this in a way I wish I hadn't, and you're being authentic. And that's what we know fosters connection. And that's what we want with our kids.
Well, Debbie, I'm dying to know your culture recommendations, but first I just wanted to end on asking you talked at the top about menopause and like, if you could go back to your perimenopausal self and just tell her like, get the help. I'm thinking about beyond what we've already discussed today. Is there anything that you, knowing all you know now, wish you could go back to your new mother self and tell her about raising a differently wired kid?
I mean, I just would tell her that you cannot control the outcome of any of this. Like, I'm used to being able to do things well, you know, like I can like research a problem. I can create things. Like I'm really competent in that way. And I just tried to force will so long with my child to try to control and like guarantee specific outcomes or paths for us. And that was exhausting, a complete failure because we can't control another human being. And so I think that would be the biggest thing, is to just kind of, I would have started that work earlier to question why was this so important to me, and to just kind of let go of that and instead just focus on who my child was. Because it was a couple of years of me trying to control and get things back on the path that I wanted it to be on.
Thank you for that. Well, do you have any culture recommendations for us and our listeners? Either they can be broad or from the world of neurodivergence, for adults, for kids.
I mean, you know what I wrote down when I was considering culture recommendations?
Please,
I wrote down The Traitors, like the show on Peacock. Like,
is that the one with
is that the
with Alan
Cumming? Is it
Cumming?
that one?
Yes.
I've seen that trailer so many times because I watched Love Island with my nieces this summer, and it would every commercial break, and I was just like, this is the most bonkers trailer I've ever seen. I don't understand what's happening.
My best friend told me I have to watch it. My best friend,
finally,
and she's,
tell us, Debbie,
I trust her. So and I trust
the
you.
trailers.
I mean,
Traitors.
Just full disclosure, I am a reality show junkie, and like I consume a ton of political content in the form of podcasts. Like I'm also a news junkie. I consume a lot of parenting stuff, and then the other third are podcasts that are recapping various reality shows.
Yeah, sounds like a great balance.
I'm a social scientist. This is like from a feminist perspective,
Definitely.
You know?
Yeah.
So I'm just putting that out there. But the Traitors, like I actually got my husband involved too. And now he's like, is there a new episode? And it's basically, it is a group of kind of people from various reality shows get together in a castle in Scotland. And yes, Alan Cumming is the host, and he wears the most outrageous, campy outfits, like I just want to applaud him when he walks out each week, because what he's wearing is like to die for. And they do these ridiculous kind of challenges, and there are a few people who are traitors who are trying to like murder off the faithfuls, and it's just ridiculous, and it's so fun and strategic. And anyway, and there's a whole UK seasons, and in fact,
yeah, they're in like a Scottish castle or something,
yes,
right?
They are in a castle in the Highlands.
Sold. I'm like, yes, take me there. And
actually, what I've discovered is, like, I didn't realize this, but the Netherlands is kind of like the origin of most reality television shows. Big Brother started here. Like, I know. Right. And apparently the Traitors is called De Verraters, and it originated here years ago. So I'm in the right place. Now I have to just work on my Dutch and watch those past seasons as well.
Yeah, get weird ahead of everyone else. That's actually, so at the bookstore in Oakland, shout out to Bather's Library, where I take my feminist book class. There is also a class going on right now about like analyzing Real Housewives. So yeah, you're not alone in your sociological kind of intake and lens there.
Yeah, I'm just like a multifaceted person, I suppose. But so I would say reality is like kind of my one culture thing, my biggest culture thing, and I don't even know, like, beyond that, like, I'm just like really into minimalism right now. So I'm like following, some Instagrammers that like, I'm just like, I'm a constant purger. So I don't know if that's like a movement. I know there's like the Swedish art of death cleaning. You're a binger. Okay. Yeah. So. I'm a purger. Like, I don't know what it is about me, but that's something I'm kind of fascinated by. Like, how like minimalist can we be?
I'm into that. I'm so into that. I
respect.
Threw out a trash bag of stuff from my kid's room yesterday when he was at school. So good. So good. I like dumped all this stuff, a bunch of plastic crap in the trash. And then I took a big bag of clothes and miscellaneous things to this kid's resale store. And like, it was like my trunk was full. And in the little resale store, I found like one cute little dress that I bought. And like, I felt so good exchanging like so much crap for like one adorable dress that I loved.
Perfect.
I like getting rid of stuff too, but not as much as I like getting stuff. So it's just simple math. It creates a lot of problems. Yeah. Good on you both.
It's a compulsion. It's not like it feels a little compulsive to me, but
yeah.
All right. Well, I'm willing to check out Traitors. I have like one reality show essentially as an adult. With my kids, I watch Lego Masters. I watched Project Runway Junior only had 2 seasons, which was disturbing, but that was great. But on my own, I'm a Top Chef fan. Okay. And so we do have tonight, actually, our friends are coming over. Every March, I'm like, is it Top Chef time? And I realize that like there's already been 2 episodes or something. So we're going to try to squeeze out the first 2 episodes of the season with our friends tonight while all the kids watch, whatever, probably the Traitors in another room.
That's exciting.
I'm very excited. We always do a betting thing where like after the first episode, we do a draft and each person gets 3 contestants. And anytime one of your contestants wins an elimination challenge, you get a treat from the other person. And if one of your contestants gets voted off, you have to get a treat for you have to get a treat for the other person. And then if one of your contestants wins the whole thing, which mine did last year, no big deal, you get like a dinner of your choice from the other person, either out or like cooked.
I think you gamified the game. You're like, it's not enough of a game, so I'm going to gamify it more.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should gamify Traitors. You get to murder someone in real life if one of your
you so didn't hear that on this podcast. No one endorsed. We do
anti-murder. We are anti-murder, but we are pro Debbie Reber even more than we were an hour ago. Listen to the Tilt Parenting podcast. It's so good. I want to shout out to, I want to lift up. I found an episode number 213. How to talk to kids when the world feels like a scary place. That feels like something everyone could use a little bit of advice on right now. and pick up Debbie's book. We'll put it in our bookshop. Anything else you want to plug today, Debbie?
No, I don't think so. Just check out the podcast. I will say I'm redoing the podcast page because it's really having that many episodes. It's so hard to find. Like, it's overwhelming. So I don't know when this is coming out, but we're in the process of recategorizing everything. So I'm hoping it will help people really hone in on exactly the episodes that they need. So
okay,
I just realized,
stay tuned.
We're going to release this episode at the end of the month, at the end of March. And I realized World Autism Awareness Day is April 2nd. So we'll be right on.
That's good timing.
Track with.
Yes, and we are moving. The culture is moving towards rebranding as Autism Acceptance. We do like a big, actually in April, I'm now leading because a wonderful mother moved on to middle school, the Autism Acceptance kind of like effort for our school in April.
Nice.
I welcome ideas and resources, but like we try to like have a conversation in every classroom about autism.
That's awesome.
And, it's really fun.
I mean, I would just say like just what I'm always talking with my community about is like follow autistic adults, learn from autistic adults. And I will put a shout out to someone who's like my favorite resource in that space. Her name is Dr. Megan Ananeff, and she has a fantastic Instagram called Neurodivergent Insights. And she's diagnosed autistic and ADHD, so an ADHDer. As an adult, she's a psychotherapist, and she also has a neurodivergent autistic teen daughter. And she discovered her own wiring recently. And she is a visual thinker. So she'll do these really cool graphic designs and Venn diagrams, like autism, anxiety, and where's the overlap? ADHD, autism, anxiety, where's the overlap? So if you want to kind of really understand diagnoses and how they work with each other, she's wonderful to follow. And she's a great podcast as well. So I would recommend checking her out.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's not one I've heard of. Well, thank you, Debbie, so much for your time today. Enjoy the Netherlands.
Thank you.
We'll see you stateside, maybe never. You might be done with us as a country, but you still have a lot of fans here. And we're so grateful for your time.
Thank you so much for such a great conversation. I so appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to The Mother of It All. And like my mom always said, I got to go talk to my therapist about this.
The Mother of It All is produced by Opus Knox Media with music from It's Electric. If you liked this episode, why not send it to a friend right now? Go on, we'll wait. You can follow us on Substack at themotherofitall.substack.com, where subscribing will get you episodes and bonus posts in your inbox and connect you with the Mother of It All listener community. Plus, become a paid subscriber and get a hot off the presses Mother of It All canvas tote. We're also on Instagram at The Mother of It All, and you can email us anytime with ideas or feedback at motherculturepod@gmail.com.